Had a busy couple of months, haven't you?
Yes.
New NRL teams.
Yes.
A
Dolphins.
draw.
Go the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Bringing Wayne Bennett back to Queensland.
Oh, that was all you, was it?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And the draw, yes, very good draw for the Broncos. I'd like to claim that.
What about the Titans and Cowboys?
And Titans, the Cowboys, yes. Yeah. Rebecca Frizzell, good mate of mine. Once, I grew up in Red Hill, Ashgrove. The Broncos are my team. You can't change teams.
Yeah, well, we can't call them Redcliffe, so may as well go Red Hill. Tell me this, the politics of sport or the sport of politics? What's more cutthroat?
Politics is sport.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
You're just going to leave it at that, are you? No stories, you're not going to dob anyone in? Or?
No, and I was saying earlier to my date that I've now got is that, I think there's just different motivations for people and the way that sport's organised is very different to how political parties are organised. So I think that, I think the Olympic movement's probably a bit different in that regard compared to like a sport like rugby league. I am working on it. But it is, there's just so much vested in it, so much, blood, sweat and tears for the athletes to get there at that elite level. All of the coaching staff, the people that have invested in, the parents that have, put in all those hours. It's just the stakes are so high, I think, at this level.
All right, well, let's talk about Olympics and Paralympics coming up. I mean, there's nothing like a Games to actually get stuff done, is there? Because it's more than just a fortnight of sport, isn't it, what we're going to experience here?
And I think that's the quote, Ben, that everyone is saying. And I was also just talking today about, we think about what the Olympics means. And there's many people in this room, and I do want to acknowledge all of the Olympians in the room here today, that know what Olympics is. But for the ordinary punter that, has lived in southeast Queensland, most of them have never experienced the Olympics unless they went down to Sydney. So I think being able to translate that to the broader community so they can really understand what the momentum is, what the once in history opportunity is for southeast Queensland and our state and our city is huge. But to me, the biggest thing that we have going in our favour is that we do have an 11-year runway. We have 11 years to get this right. And I also think that gives us a unique opportunity to bring everybody in our community on that journey so they can have a say.
All right, talking about getting it right, there's a big saying in sport that you probably learn more from a loss than you do a win.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, that's actually, a very good point. I was going back to your former life, right. Commonwealth Games, there was a lot of firsts there, a lot of boxes ticked. It was the first time there was equal medals, men and women, first time you actually got things done before the event, like 6 months out. There was a lot of firsts. What, though, did you get wrong at the Commonwealth Games? What can we learn from that heading into the Olympics and Paralympics?
Yeah, look, I think you're right, Ben. We should start with some of the wins. I think, equal amount of medals for men and women, a fully integrated Commonwealth Games, the first Commonwealth Games to have a reconciliation action plan with the traditional owners, which is now part of the policy of the Commonwealth Games going forward. So it's a legacy that was born here in Queensland and will now be globally. But, we did get things wrong, and I think you and I have spoken about it before around, I think a particular former Premier did call it Armageddon when it came to traffic, and we had some amazing talent both in the private sector and the public sector working on our traffic management plan, but the fear for so many people, particularly on the Gold Coast, that it was all going to grind to a halt. I think some of the messaging was absolutely overplayed. I think I was only just talking to Tracy before that, I know from Mark Stockwell, one of the things he laments is that we weren't able to keep the athletic track, and this is an interesting topic going into the Olympics because as you can imagine, he lobbied me heavily and I tried to secure the money, but we didn't have the Gold Coast City Council, the state government or the feds willing to kick in that additional money outside of the original budget of 1.5. So in the end, we had the athletics track was removable and we had to rip it up. Fortunately, though, I was the education minister, so I remember sitting at my desk going, okay, what do we do? What am I going to do with this athletics track? And I do come from a family that believes in waste not, want not. So we ended up divvying it up into 50 different run-up tracks for long jump and installing it in schools right across Queensland. So I hope to think that there's a little Olympian out there running on that track that'll be here for 2032.
That's a great idea. Well done. I didn't know that. What about governments and messages and getting those things right? Nothing's really changed, has it, since you've been there? 11 years, a long runway. What should be the first priorities? What's the first things we need to get right?
Look, I mean, a lot of the conversation that's dominating the discussions at the moment is about infrastructure, and that is critical. And you kind of want to hope that the people running the show get the infrastructure right. And as I said, the 11 years is a long time. I think for me, if you dig deeper into that story, it is about procurement. How do we ensure that as many Queensland businesses, Brisbane businesses, and Australian businesses get the opportunity to actually do that? I mean, I do remember the Commonwealth Games having to defend why they bought mattresses from China. And I'm saying, everyone can sing the Magic Making Mattresses ad. How can we not get them to make the mattresses? And
how come?
Well, because their argument at the level was that it was too late. They couldn't produce it in time. That wasn't the right order. It wasn't the right, So that's very frustrating to me. It's one of the things that I think we need to have very deliberate policies up front and early to make sure that that doesn't happen. Having said that, the seating, because I also had the story about seating coming from Sydney and not Brisbane, but when you scratch the surface of that story, the reason why we have this amazing seating company in Sydney was because of the Sydney Olympics, and they were able to secure the contract for the Commonwealth Games.
All right, so when do you start then to make sure all these policies get into place?
I'm just a very dedicated Brisbane girl that's lived here all my life.
Sounds like you could be. Actually, before we get into that, your role now with the Tech Council, I mean, we're talking about sport and sports hubs. We're seeing that story that Southeast Queensland could be a sporting science hub for the Southern Hemisphere, for the Asian Pacific region. It makes a hell of a lot of sense, but there's a lot of knock-on and benefit from that too, isn't there?
Huge, and I think it's real. Like when, there's a lot of things that people are sort of throwing around about what is the legacy for us, and there's words about community and inclusion, which is really important, about becoming more of an active city, dealing with some of the obesity issues we have in our community. That's all critical. I also think that a sports tech hub off the back of some of our universities are seen globally. You would have seen the press this week about UQ coming second in the world when it comes to sports science. We have already global companies now, sports tech companies like Volve that are based at Newstead that now have 100 people working for them, and their technology is now deployed in the NFL globally, the English Premier League overseas. So, I think if we make a very strong decision now that we want to be an attractor of tech talent, using sports, tech and science to be a lure to come here, as well as the AIS and all the other sporting codes that they're out in the market for. But I do think if we're deliberate about that, we have the foundations to actually make that real. And I just caught Natalie Cook's eye, and Natalie is actually leading some of this work with the new strategy they're developing in the Queensland government. So they've had the sense to bring you in to sort of run that. But I think, that's a huge opportunity for Queensland, and one we shouldn't miss.
And that's the big thing that, a lot of people, I remember when I was in radio and I was banging on going, this is great, Olympics, yes. Everyone was phoning in saying, really, what a waste of money. But it gets stuff done, and it not only attracts the world's best athletes, it attracts the world's best, full stop.
And I think we're going to see people come, already with COVID, we started seeing it. So with the digital revolution that's happening right now in our economy, whether it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it touches everyone. That's enabling people of talent to come home. And I think we're going to see a lot of that over the next 2032. Actually, Steve Titmuss was just sitting here saying in 10 years' time, we'll be saying people in Sydney are going, oh, Sydney's cheap. It's going to be too expensive to live in Brisbane. But that's the way we've got to be thinking. We've got to be thinking, and I was reflecting on this, like we need to be brave and we need to be bold, and we have to, and I think the editor of the Courier Mail said it today in his piece, he's saying, yes, we absolutely should be aiming to put on the very best Olympics that has ever been staged. But we also need to be thinking, how do we deliver the best Olympics that ensures that we set our economy up, our community up for 2040? And I think that's what, and Julie McDonald's here too. She was on the Legacy Committee for the Commonwealth Games. Like you can't, to me, that experience is so critical. And one of the reasons why we even went for the Commonwealth Games in 2010, and I was part of that cabinet under Anna Bligh, it's been 10 years, so I can talk about it now. We've changed the rules, so you can talk about it not 30 years, but 10 years. That was a split vote. A lot of cabinet ministers did not want to see that go because of the cost, as you said, Ben, and taxpayers saying, why are you wasting this money on sport? But the Gold Coast needed that. It needed that injection. It needed that infrastructure. Light Rail Stage 2 wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Commonwealth Games.
Exactly. It's nothing like a Games to get things done, to get things built. I ran into you a couple of weeks ago at Rebel Sport, of all places, when Ash Barty came and made her first public appearance since returning home, and you were there with your daughter Grace, and it was just, we were talking as adults and how much we admire Ash Barty. Little kids admire Ash Barty. What Shane did for our generation, what Arnie has done for this generation, what Ash Barty's doing, that's the link, isn't it? That's probably the most precious commodity we have. As much as legacy, it's getting those kids on board through those athletes.
Absolutely, and that was very nice because my husband had spent a lot of money at Rebel Sports, so we managed to get a ticket. We were in the draw to get like a special ticket. So I turned up and the camera's like going, "What's Kate Jones doing here in the VIP section?" I'm like going, "No, we just spent a lot of money at Rebel Sport." and I buy Rebel Sports vouchers for all the kids' birthdays because they get them active,
Where's the Irish dancing session at Rebel Sport? I didn't see one there.
It's not there.
Okay.
It's in the back block. But in reality, it was fun because it was my daughter and I was like, "Oh my God, you're going to meet Ash Barty." And like, we get there and she's saying, "Mum, like, it was really interesting watching her because she was a bit too young for, she's met Natalie before. Natalie taught her how to play beach volleyball. But she was like, "Mum, you were so excited, like you were emotional," like she's 7. I said, "Yeah, because she's the best in the world, Grace. This is a girl that grew up just down the road from you, that worked hard, that trained hard, that didn't let her size, she's, not much taller than me, get in the way and just think, I can do this." And I think that's when you get emotional talking about the Olympics, because it is about opening up the eyes to the opportunity globally that local kids can have a part of. And that's the magic.
Yeah. Well said. Is that strange getting clapped on stage for you? Where you've come from? Not often politicians get clapped.
I've had both.
Yeah.
I always joke, we were just talking before about who comes to an Olympics, and Steve was saying sports mad people. And I realised this, I know most rules to all sports. Rugby union is always a bit of a challenge, but
no one knows the rules to rugby
correct.
union.
I feel
Even
comfortable
the
about that now. But I've got 5 brothers, and I'm the only girl, so I just thought everyone watched sport all the time. That sport was on the radio when it wasn't on the TV, or it would be on the radio on one channel on the TV. I just grew up immersed. I just never, I think if you grow up like that, you just kind of think, as a great quote says, sport is life.
Sport is life. I had the audacity to say to Shane Gould when I spoke to her earlier that sport is our DNA, and she pulled me up. And I'll continue that conversation with Shane and what we said next a little later on. That's a tease for later. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Kate Jones.